Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. I hope you enjoyed your weekend, and I appreciate you tuning in to the show today, whether it's on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app is sponsored, of course, by the fine folks at Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All, a veritable cornucopia of football topics await you over the course of the program, and I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. You could call or text it in to the show. Let's start with what we saw Saturday with the Denver Broncos in their second preseason game, and I think what I went into that game looking for, and we'll talk about the running backs here shortly, but just in a general sense, I think given the circumstances of that game, how very few of the starters played on Saturday, when I watched it, I was looking for, who doesn't belong here? I think that's probably the nicest compliment that you can give to anyone playing in that game on Saturday. Right? Who looks like they don't belong in a game like that? That was essentially played by backups. So who from the Broncos looked like they didn't belong? Evan Ingram looked like he didn't belong in that football game. He looked like he was much better than everyone else on the field. He only got that one catch, but that was all he needed for people to freak out about what he could be in the Broncos offense. But the three guys, but we know that Evan Ingram, that was a unique case. That was, Sean Payton had talked about it last week. He just wanted to get Ingram some work. But you can see with both he and, to a lesser extent, RJ Harvey, I think there is a willful and deliberate withholding of information. How he's going to use those guys with RJ Harvey in his ability to catch the football. Now, it doesn't mean that Sean Payton's sitting on the league's two biggest secret weapons. Not necessarily. But I don't think Sean Payton is very inclined to be showing other teams, hey, look at what RJ Harvey can do. Look at what I'm going to do with Evan Ingram. It's kind of that Joker thing. But he had to get Ingram some work. Got him that one catch. He ran a long way. He had to run clear across the field and then all the way up the field. And that was enough. He was in there on a few other plays, but they didn't look his way. And you have to understand, too, that that's part of the vision with the Joker is Evan Ingram's not going to get the ball all the time. It's, well, you're looking at this guy because he's a matchup problem. We're going to throw it to this guy over here. And I thought you saw that when he was on the field. But he was a unique case. He wasn't the normal type of player that was going to be in that game. The three guys that I singled out, and there's a fourth I want to set aside, but the three that I want to mention right now, Jared Stidham, Troy Franklin, Jonah Ellis. Those were three players for the Denver Broncos that I watched and I said they don't belong in this game. Jared Stidham, 6 of 9. He was great again, 149 yards and a touchdown. Troy Franklin, 4 catches for 67 yards, threw a block to help spring Evan Ingram on that big run. And then Jonah Ellis, at that level, playing against second stringers, he's a game wrecker. What Nick Bonito did to the 49ers, that's what Jonah Ellis was doing to the Arizona Cardinals. Those were three guys that just every time they were on the field popped. And so what does that ultimately mean for the three of them? It means they're better than backups. But are they starters? Right? And I think Jared Stidham is a great example of this. And a lot more talk about, should the Broncos entertain trade calls for Jared Stidham? And my answer is emphatically no. You have taken out a fairly expensive insurance policy at the quarterback position. Jared Stidham is not paid like your normal run-of-the-mill backup QB. Sean Payton wanted Jared Stidham and told George Payton to scratch out a bigger check than other backup quarterbacks get. Why would you sell off your insurance policy at the quarterback, at the most important position, in a year where you're throwing out the idea of this team competing for a Super Bowl? You don't do that. What are you going to get in return for Jared Stidham? Who's paying for Jared Stidham? Like, what franchise wants to trade for Jared Stidham, and what are they willing to give up? Because I promise you they're not willing to give up anything that would be worth it for the Denver Broncos to trade him. But the good news is, if something were to happen to Bo Nix, you have a guy, and I'll bring up somebody from Sean Payton's past to make a comparison here, Teddy Bridgewater. Remember Teddy Bridgewater and what he did with the New Orleans Saints? We filled in for like 5 games. They went 5-0. Like, the Broncos could do something like that. Maybe not 5-0, but that same idea they could do with Jared Stidham. All hope for the Broncos to win whatever games Bo Nix cannot play in would not be lost. Because this is a guy who certainly has a great grasp of Sean Payton's offense. And it's like he's in this weird limbo where he's probably not a starter. Could he be in the top 32 quarterbacks in the league? I don't think so. I'd really have to look at that Indianapolis situation, but he's probably not one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. But he could be in the 30s. So if something were to happen to Bo Nix, for a short period of time, Jared Stidham could come in and give you confidence, if you're a Broncos fan, that the Broncos could still win. But like the Teddy Bridgewater thing in New Orleans, the difference is Jared Stidham can't be your starter for 17 games if you're talking Super Bowl. Right? But Sean Payton, because Sean Payton's all about winning on the margins. So in his mind, something were to happen. I know Stidham predates Bo Nix, but even going back to Russell Wilson, the idea that the Broncos can still win on the margins because Jared Stidham is a capable enough quarterback that for a few weeks, the Broncos could somewhat get by with him, waiting until their starter were to come back. But the Broncos aren't competing for the AFC West with Jared Stidham as their quarterback. But what he showed on Saturday is, look, he's maybe the king of the backup quarterbacks, which I don't say that to diminish him. It's actually a compliment because at no point in his career has Jarrett Stidham been looked at as a legitimate starter. And that's fine because look at Chase Daniel, look at Nick Foles, look at some of these, Jacoby Brissett, who, by the way, you now know is the backup quarterback for Kyler Murray should anything happen in Arizona. Like, look how long those guys have been in the league. Look how much money they have made. It's a good living that Jarrett Stidham is creating for himself and his family. But this idea that Stidham has tremendous value through the league and that the Denver Broncos would be smart to cash in on that doesn't make any sense to me. Just know that if Bo Nix were to tweak a hammy and he'd be out for a couple of weeks or something, that the Broncos could still potentially win in his absence with Jarrett Stidham running the offense. Jonah Ellis is that second-year player that I think is going to make the biggest jump. He's not the most impactful second-year player because that's obviously Bo Nix. Bo Nix will have more of a say in the Broncos' record this season than Jonah Ellis. But I think Ellis, even being on the Football Writers All-Rookie team, I think is still a guy now as that next man up behind Benito and Jonathan Cooper that could get a lot of playing time. And the level of play wouldn't drop off significantly. His pursuit, his relentless pursuit of the ball carrier is something to watch. It's impressive. And he was also a guy in that game where he went, yeah, you don't need to be in this game. You're good. And then there's Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin, 4 catches, 67 yards, as I mentioned. A lot of questions about this wide receiving core. I think we know who the wide receivers are that will make the 53-man roster, but how they will be utilized is what we have yet to see. And Troy Franklin, you want to talk about a rookie taking a step in their second year. As Sean Payton says, it might be happening with this guy.
It's happening, and I'm excited. You know, I think we just got to be smart because he's playing 2 spots. But he's had a really good camp. He's confident, you know, and I've said this a bunch of times. It has to happen on the field. And you guys that have covered this team or any other team, like you see it in the preseason every year, some players that begin to make some plays and it carries over. And so that's why these games are important.
Troy Franklin might have a role, and I keep going back to, you know, there's only one football. Okay, and the Broncos want to run the ball. And they want to get the ball to Cortland Sutton, and they want to get the ball to Evan Ingram. And the unique role that Marvin Mims has. Like, not everyone can have a great season this year. The Denver Broncos are not going to be the greatest show on turf. They're not going to go that deep in their wide receiver group. But how does Sean Payton like to build his offense? Quarterback that he likes with a bunch of different skill sets. And depending on the opponent, the down, the distance, the situation, he'll employ a certain skill set. And maybe there's a down a distance, a situation in which Troy Franklin would be best utilized. But he looked like a player on Saturday, like Ellis and Stidham, where it's like, you look much better than the guys you're playing against. And we haven't seen a lot of Devon Vele. I think it's because his role is safe. But if what Sean Payton is saying comes to fruition, has anybody, you know what? Outside of the red zone, has even Cortland Sutton nailed down his role? Right? Couldn't you honestly, even though he has more of a track record of production than anybody else in that wide receiver room, really between the 20s, can you even say that Cortland Sutton's role is a little bit nebulous, is a little bit fluid? Inside the red zone, inside the 20, Cortland Sutton's got to be on the field. That's what he does best. But getting to the red zone, does Cortland Sutton have to be on the field? I don't know that he has to be. I don't know that he's that kind of a receiver. So could it be Devon Vele bringing some of the same skill sets that Cortland Sutton does, but you put a guy with a little bit more speed in Troy Franklin on the field? I could see that. Not all of these guys are going to be incredibly productive. But could they be utilized? Could they get playing time? I think you may be able to see that. And there's one other guy that I purposely set aside. Pat Bryant's bordering on that. I mean, every ball that is thrown in Pat Bryant's direction, he's catching. He had 4 catches for 70 yards. He's certainly getting some work. And with Sean Payton's track record with rookies, I'm not putting a lot of stock into Pat Bryant this year. But again, you see the vision. You understand why he's a part of the team. There's a lot of other guys that are probably in line ahead of him, but Pat Bryant is probably Stidham, Bryant, and Ellis have probably been the 3 best Broncos players when you take both preseason games into account. He was the only rookie that made it, that left an impression on me after game 1. And he was very good last night. Or on Saturday night, rather. So another good performance by the Denver Broncos, certainly, and they have some guys that you feel like could have a role with this Broncos team this year. They're not the guys that are ultimately going to make the difference between the Broncos competing for a Super Bowl, winning a division, all this other stuff. But Troy Franklin, Jonah Ellis, these are guys that more and more are looking like, okay, Sean Payton can put these guys out there and they can play a role for the Broncos. Take your thoughts on Saturday's preseason game. 719-247-1313. Of course, the performance by the Denver Broncos, perhaps all the more impressive given that Sean Payton kind of had his hands off the wheel on Saturday. We'll talk about that next on Extra Sports 1300. Broncos with another impressive performance with mainly their backups. And they even had a backup play caller on Saturday night as Davis Webb, QB coach, took over the play calling duties on Saturday. Here's Sean Payton on why he would do something like that.
If you took, I said this to Greg earlier, if you had Pete call a game, Joe, Davis, myself, whoever, you're going to get like so many different combinations on that call sheet. You'll get the emphasis in the run. You know, we wanted to run the ball well tonight, but I thought he was the biggest thing is getting on to the next play as soon as you've called that play. And I thought he was fast, efficient, had a lot of energy. The players responded, and I thought he did a great job. So it's no different than the player that has a real good game. There's a confidence then, like, I can do this.
So the first part of what he mentioned there, I think I don't want to say it's a selfish reason to do it, but there's a reason. There's reasons that ultimately do benefit Sean Payton in doing all of this. The benefit for Davis Webb is obvious, right? The more Sean Payton empowers him and the Broncos get results with Davis Webb, the hotter of a coaching candidate he becomes. So it's good for Davis Webb that Sean Payton does something like this. It's beneficial for him, but I look at this, and again, it's not being selfish, but there's a benefit to Sean Payton and the Broncos as a whole for doing something like this. And the first part of it, where he mentions the different combinations, you know, the sequencing of plays, it's a different perspective. It's the same group of plays, but you're getting a different perspective on it. And then maybe Sean Payton says, ooh, I like the way you followed up that play call or this play call. Maybe I'll utilize that when we get into the season. It helps Sean Payton kind of take a step back and let somebody else use his menu of plays to see if there's a combination that he's not really thinking of. I think the chances of that are slim just because of who Sean Payton is. But maybe there was some sequencing during that game where Sean Payton filed it away and it's like, oh, I'm going to use that later. So it benefits Sean Payton, the play caller, to empower someone else just in case they have some different ideas. And maybe there's even a bigger part of this here, a bigger picture. You know, coaches do care about their coaching tree. I mean, think about how much Sean Payton talks about Bill Parcells and the impact he had. I think that there is a natural feeling from coaches that they want to be able to pass on their knowledge. And there's no one that, for me, has been better at that than Mike Shanahan. Right? He's the epitome of this. Right? With his son and with Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur, and the list goes on, that coaching tree, it's as big of a reason, almost as big of a reason as Shanahan's 2 Super Bowls on why he should be in the Hall of Fame, and it's dumb that he's not yet. Because you want to talk about impact on the game. The fact that the Shanahan coaching tree has so many branches and are among the most successful of the head coaches in the National Football League. Like, that matters. And I think Sean Payton is going to be a Hall of Fame coach. I think he is, but in the same breath, I just mentioned that Mike Shanahan has 2 Super Bowls and he's not in. It's only one that gets in every year. One coach. And I'm not saying that this is high on Sean Payton's list at all, but this is part of it, that coaching tree to be able to build that up. Sean Payton talks about Bill Parcells. Think about how obsessed he is with the Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell. How he talks about the Detroit Lions. So it's like he's almost taking credit for what is happening in Detroit because of Dan Campbell. Which you got to stop short of completely taking credit, but I got to imagine some part of Sean Payton feels pride in what is going on in Detroit. And if Davis Webb ends up being a head coach somewhere else, I think there's a tremendous amount of pride that Sean Payton would feel in that. And as you get older in your career, I think many people do think about their legacy, their mark. It's not all self-serving. There is a little bit of, hey, I want to set up the next generation. I want to leave this place in a better spot than I found it. So it's when I'm saying this, it may sound like it's coming across as saying Sean Payton's trying to boost himself up. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. He looks at Bill Parcells and the tremendous impact he had on Sean Payton's career. Sean Payton, I think, wants to have that on other coaches. He would like to be talked about in the same way that Sean Payton talks about Bill Parcells one day. But that's the bigger picture. That's the longer term. For right now, the beneficiaries are Davis Webb because he is getting more experience and he can go into this next round of head coaching interviews and say, I called plays for this preseason game and we put up 27 points. And Sean Payton has entrusted me to call plays. You should too. So it helps him, but it also has a benefit to Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos because maybe there was something that Davis Webb saw or some sequence of plays that now Sean Payton is going to utilize when the regular season rolls around. But that was an interesting tidbit from Saturday that it was actually Webb who was calling the plays and not Sean Payton. 719-24-7. 13-13. Plenty more on the Denver Broncos. We got to talk about that running back situation, which we will, but I want to take a look around the NFL at some of the other things of note that happened throughout preseason week 2, including Cleveland, Chicago, and Vegas. I hope you're sitting down for this next piece of information because if you're not, it might knock you right off of your feet. Joe Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns this year, at least to start. Browns finally making that announcement. Did it have to be announced? I don't know. We did this for years here. I guess we do need to know officially who the starting quarterback is at some point. But it's not surprising. They were always going to start with Joe Flacco. The question just becomes, who do they turn to when the season goes awry? Dylan Gabriel got his opportunity this weekend, and it was a roller coaster ride this week. Because it was, well, Shador might start because Dylan Gabriel's hurt, and then Shador immediately gets hurt. And then do they have any healthy quarterbacks? And Kenny Pickett is still injured. And then Dylan Gabriel apparently was healthy enough to play. I thought he looked very good within the script that the Browns had for that game. And even if teams don't necessarily script out the first 12 to 15 plays like they do during the regular season, I can't imagine they wouldn't. But let's just, for argument's sake, say it was all on feel. I mean, they at least go in with an idea of what they want to do with the quarterback, right? And I thought that they did a really good job, just like with Shador the week prior, saying, what does this guy do best? Let us allow him to do that. It was a lot of very quick passes from Dylan Gabriel. And that's what he did at Oregon. And he was successful, led him right downfield. Where things went awry, I think, for Dylan Gabriel was when the game wore on, when they had to go deeper into the playbook, when they had to adjust on the fly, when he had to. Loses a fumble, throws a pick six. You would say statistically, in the end, he did not show off better than Shador. But there, to me, in lies the difference between the two. There are a lot of reasons why I think that Shador is the better choice than Dylan Gabriel coming out of college, but also for this Browns situation when they decide that Joe Flacco's services are no longer needed. It's when plays break down. It's when the game wears on. What Shador is able to do with his legs to sustain plays, keep them alive, I think that is a value, and that's something that he has over Dylan Gabriel. And I also think because of the situation he found himself in Boulder, he had to play the hero more than Dylan Gabriel did. It's not necessarily a knock on Dylan Gabriel. He was playing for a great football team in the Oregon Ducks. Like, it's the curse of being on a good team. They don't need you to save them. The Buffs needed Shador to save them. And it conditioned him to be kind of built for those kind of moments. I trust Shador more if he has to break containment than Dylan Gabriel. And I think those are things that Kevin Stefanski has to weigh here. But I thought early on in that game against Philly, Stefanski did a great job of highlighting what Dylan Gabriel is really good at. He's a very quick decision maker. He's accurate with the football. I just wonder when the offensive line, if it's, for instance, let's say it's that matchup during the regular season. I know Jahad Campbell was enough of a problem, but now imagine the whole Philly defense. I think that I would rather have Shedeur in that situation than Dylan Gabriel. And I think ultimately that's what Cleveland is going to decide. But Dylan Gabriel was able to showcase what made him such a prolific quarterback at the college level. But sometimes it's what you didn't have to do in college that may limit your chances in the NFL. And Shedeur was asked to do a lot and is capable, I think, of doing more than Dylan Gabriel. Now, we'll take a closer look at how the two quarterbacks compare when Jake Burns will join me. He hosts the Browns Film Breakdown Pod, so he went in depth on both of these guys' performances, and he'll compare and contrast when he joins me next hour. But there was a lot to like early from Dylan Gabriel, but the longevity or stamina in the game perhaps wasn't what Shedeur had against Carolina. And then Dylan Gabriel said something on the sideline that has gotten quite a bit of attention. So here's what that was with the question put in for context, because I think it's important.
You gave us some fabulous wisdom on how you tune out the noise and you don't let it infiltrate yourself. Will you share that with everybody at home?
Yeah, I think it's just part of it. You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors, and I totally understand that. And my job is to compete, and that's what I'm focused on doing. Of course, we're doing this mid-game, but it's something that I'll get used to, and just want to be the best team that I can and create an environment where we can all go do our best work. That's all we want to do.
And he was asked about that because whenever you hear entertainers, you think that he's taking a shot like his former college coach took a shot at Colorado, right? That's how it's perceived. Then he was given a chance to qualify those statements after the game, and he was talking about the media. Now, he wasn't talking about his Shedeur. And you understand it, right? There's a lot of talk outside of Cleveland, well, inside Cleveland, but outside of the Cleveland locker room about who should play, who should not, and all of that kind of stuff, and who can play, who can't. I think in some ways, Dylan Gabriel is actually putting his arm around Shedeur and saying it's us against all of you. We're competing. We're trying to become the best quarterbacks we can and thus help the Browns become the best team they can be. I think he's embracing Shedeur more than he's taking a shot at him. But the way he says that, it's going to sound condescending. And there are some members of the national media who took it as such. I am as tired as anyone of the big bad media narratives. Right? It's an easy place to go. The media is saying this. They're putting out all of this stuff. Let's rally against it, and it's fine. It's a symbiotic relationship, right? Between athletes, coaches, teams, and the media. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's not a parasitic one. Teams will make it seem like it's a parasitic relationship. Without the media, they would not be able to play the games that they like to play for the amount of money that they do, because the media helps keep the fans engaged, keeps them excited. They pay the money to go to the games. It's all within the ecosystem, and they all play off of one another. So I'm as tired of the narrative that, the media is trying to drive us apart, and the media is doing this, and let's rally against the media. I'm as tired of that as anyone. But to take his term entertainers as offensive is silly to me. I get told on a regular basis by people in my company that I am an entertainer. That's what we are here to do. Now, we try to entertain with our legitimate thoughts and opinions on things, but we are entertainers. So I don't know if that's what's got some members of the national media all riled up or what, but like, that is what we do. So I understand the initial reaction of, oh, is he taking a shot at Shedeur? Well, I listened to the question, I listened to the answer, and I hear him clarify. I'm like, he's not. So really beyond that, okay, yeah, I'm tired of the us versus the media thing. And that happens in sports. It happens in politics. I get tired of it. But to take offense to it and make it a huge deal, I don't understand that. I think Dylan Gabriel's just saying, like, we got to all pull in the same direction. We got to all compete, get better, all that kind of stuff. I can say things about Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback, and why he shouldn't be the Browns' long-term answer, but his leadership abilities, his focus, whatever you want to call it, is not one of them. Dylan Gabriel's a veteran. Like, he's been around the block. He's been around a couple of blocks in his college career. He's trained up well. It's not about that. It's about who he is as a football player. That I would say falls short of what I think Shedeur Sanders is as a football player. Speaking of quarterbacks, we talk about preseason perhaps being a showcase, especially for rookie quarterbacks. Right? And we saw this last year with Sean Payton. When he had Bo Nix and everybody was talking about how they overdrafted him and he wasn't going to be that good, Sean Payton made sure that Bo Nix showed out in the preseason. And I know Caleb Williams is not a rookie anymore, but it was the same mentality from Ben Johnson. And also, it wasn't just about showcasing Caleb Williams. It was about showcasing Ben Johnson. The Bears put up 38 points. Tyson Badgett had nearly 200 yards passing. Like, that was early on, it was a showcase for Caleb Williams. Right? This is what Caleb is going to be this year for the Chicago Bears. But throughout the rest of the game, it was Ben Johnson saying, okay, Caleb's out of the game. Now it's my turn to really take center stage. It was a showcase for Ben Johnson as much as anybody. And you got to say, it was quite the showcase. But as far as Caleb is concerned, I think we really don't have his rookie season in the proper context. And you know who I blame? Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. Because if you look historically, Caleb Williams was fine as a rookie quarterback. The two issues that he had were, one, he came in with an unbelievable amount of hype. Right? Some of that's his fault, some of it's not. Most of it's not. But it's the hype he came in with, and it's also the fact that you had Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix play so well in their rookie year, and it warped our view of Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams had a very good top 5, top 6 rookie quarterback year last year. He did. In fact, his touchdown to interception ratio was better than Bo Nix or Jaden Daniels. So there was some good that Caleb Williams showed. It was just he had two peers that far exceeded anybody's expectations. And he did not, I think it's fair to say, live up to the tremendous amount of hype he came into the league with. But Caleb Williams had a fine first season. The one thing that was bad from him was the amount of sacks he took. Now, a lot of that you can contribute to the offensive line. And I think Greg Olson pointed this out during the Fox broadcast. Like, he faced as many unblocked pass rushers as anybody in the NFL. So I know Sean Payton says sacks are a quarterback stat. Not when the pass rusher is getting through unimpeded. I think what Sean Payton has said serves a purpose, and it's the purpose of, hey, we got to put more of this on the quarterback. And I would agree with that. But if you watch the Bears last year, there were some sacks that Caleb Williams took that you're like, what is he supposed to do? But even you set aside those, it was Caleb Williams realizing I can't run away from people like I did at USC. It's a different level of athlete I'm going against. And so if you watch him at USC, he was so supremely talented compared to everybody else. I watched him in Boulder. And like, CU was getting pressure, but Caleb would just run away from it. That was a lesson that he had to learn last year in his rookie year. And he took too many sacks by himself because of that. The total number of sacks, you got to put about as much on the Bears offensive line as you put on Caleb. But what you saw in that preseason game was Ben Johnson calling plays that got Caleb's weapons open quickly. And you saw a more decisive Caleb Williams than you did for much of last year. The timing was better. He'd take his drop, plant his back foot, and the ball will be out. But it's also because Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland and his wide receivers got open by the time he finished his drop. So obviously it all plays into one another. But I thought Caleb Williams was very decisive with the football, knew exactly where he was going to go with it, and credit to the guys around him and a credit to Ben Johnson that the play calls were right to get guys open, and those guys got open. So Caleb didn't have to sit there with the football like he had to do so much last year. So for this Ben and Caleb duo, it's preseason. We'll always throw out that caveat. It was good, though. It looked good. Now, can they do it during the regular season? That's what we're saying about everything we're seeing over these weekends. I want to get to Ashton Genty because I was critical of him last week. He was better, but I want to warn Ashton Genty about something. I'll do that a little bit later. Again, we'll go more in depth on the Browns quarterback competition. What does the film say about Shador versus Dylan Gabriel? But in the meantime, let's talk about that running back competition that was playing out on Saturday for the Denver Broncos. Patrick, this is Welcome in hour number 2 on this Monday edition of the show. Coming up in 20 minutes, I will be joined by Jake Burns to break down a little Cleveland Browns film. How did Shador and Dylan Gabriel show out in their respective starts, and who would be best equipped to be the next man up after Joe Flacco in Cleveland? If you have thoughts on this Monday, I'd love to hear from you. 719-247-1313. Shouts to those of you watching the show on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300. Broncos with another decisive win in preseason. What will it get them during the regular season? That's the big question. But in the meantime, we're worried about roster spots, especially for the running backs. So, what did Sean Payton think about all of his running backs not named J.K. Dobbins, who didn't play? And that's what it's all about, right? Sean Payton, I don't think he looks at any of these running backs yet. Maybe R.J. Harvey longer term. I don't think he looks at any of these running backs as game breakers, no Saquon Barkleys in this running back room. But all he's trying to get is a more manageable third down for Bo Nix. That's the first thing. Anything beyond that would be great for the Denver Broncos. But ultimately, it's not a gain of one or no gain on first down. And now Bo Nix is going to have to make up the difference to try and move the chains. And to Sean Payton's point, all 4 of them, 5 of them, with Harvey, had their moments. But ultimately, the way I look at this, Audric Estime is out. He just is. We don't see him again till the second half. So it doesn't seem like there's any desire on Sean Payton's part to really showcase him with the best blockers he can put in front of him. And Estime, again, significant amount of carries, one more carry than he got last week, yet yards per carry, 2.2. At this point, somebody's got to tell me what the case is to keep Audric Estime. And I said, well, maybe he'll be on the roster, but he may not get touches. Now it's like, I don't know if this guy's going to be on the 53. And I don't know what the reason is to have him on the 53. You want a guy that will run it for 2.2 yards a carry? Look at Nate Adkins or Michael Burton or the former Saint, because of course he's a former Saint, the fullback that they just signed yesterday. Like, you want short yardage situations, you want a battering ram, that's why they have a fullback. It doesn't make any sense. And for 2 games now, Audric Estime has been, I think, greatly outperformed by his peers. In setting aside R.J. Harvey, because we know that his role is cemented and he's not a part of this conversation. It's the 4 guys for 2 spots, which it will be 4 guys. I don't know where the idea that the Broncos won't have 4 running backs on the roster. They had 4 running backs week 1 of last year. So I don't know where this idea is that they're not going to keep 4 came along. But I heard that on the broadcast on Saturday. They're going to have 4. I thought Jaleel McLaughlin really responded from last week. because we and many others spent a lot of time last week talking about, Blake Watson has that home run ability. Do you need Jaleel McLaughlin and Blake Watson? And I thought Jaleel McLaughlin really responded. 3 carries for 48 yards. Broke the 35-yard run. Like, that's a now veteran player responding to the idea that a younger guy is going to take his spot. Tyler Bidet, 4 carries, 14 yards, but the whole reason for having Tyler Bidet is his pass blocking ability. Right? Because you know that the fourth guy is, you have him just in case. Right? The third guy is going to get a very specialized role, limited looks. As I said last week, it's about J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. Once the regular season begins, it's those 2 guys. But for right now, it's out of this group of 4 with McLaughlin, Bidet, Watson, and Estime, who are going to be the 2 that will be on the 53-man roster. And I think you go McLaughlin or Watson, depending on whose speed you like better. And then you keep Bidet for his ability to pass block. And I know J.K. Dobbins can do that, but J.K. Dobbins also has a laundry list of injuries he has sustained. So I think Sean Payton would be wise to perhaps limit some of those situations that J.K. Dobbins would be in on. And say, if I can bring in a capable pass blocker in Tyler Bidet in the backfield when I have no real intention of giving J.K. Dobbins the ball because it's 3rd and 6, you put in Bidet and he can pass block for you. So in many ways, nothing has changed after what happened Saturday. My mind has not changed. Harvey and Dobbins are the guys that will really make the difference for this Broncos run game. I still think Audric Estime is the odd man out in all of this. Definitely an odd man out in all of this. And I still had Jaleel McLaughlin over Blake Watson, but I said, how is this going to go on Saturday? Because if Blake Watson keeps showing out, then that could push Jaleel McLaughlin out. And again, Jaleel McLaughlin answers with 48 yards on just 3 carries. And I know it's going to be a holistic approach. It's not just the preseason games. It's the joint practices, and it's not just the joint practices. It's the practices themselves that are going to ultimately decide this. It's not just what you saw on Saturday. But there has to be, especially for a coach like Sean Payton, who puts so much value on the preseason. What you do in a preseason game should matter. It's like in school when you get a syllabus, and it's the breakdown of our daily assignments are worth X% and the final is worth, 50% of your grade or whatever it is. Performing in a game situation, even if it's the preseason, should carry more weight than what you're doing in shorts and a helmet in practice, and maybe even to extent what you're doing in a joint practice. But I think there's little doubt that Jaleel McLaughlin was the standout. I know R.J. Harvey got the touchdown, and that's all well and good. But Jaleel McLaughlin was the one who showed out, and he showed out at the end of a week where everybody was trying to push him out of that running back room and put in Blake Watson. And to me, that should mean something. In addition to the fact that I know no one was happy with the Broncos running back room last year, but Jaleel McLaughlin was the second most productive back in that room. So there's some history that you can go to with him. And again, we're talking about change of pace. We're talking about, a third down catch out of the backfield. Maybe we're not asking, nobody's asking Jaleel McLaughlin to be the bell cow back. We're talking about who's the third guy. It's Dobbins, it's Harvey. Who's the third guy? I think should be Jaleel McLaughlin. And then the fourth guy, I would have Bidet. I would, because I don't know what use 2.2 yards a carry is. Here is Sean Payton, by the way, on the plan for the running backs, more specifically Audric Estime, who, again, we did not see until the second half. But some did a better job with those opportunities than others. And that's where I think Audric Estime is still the definitely one of the odd man out right now. And we'll see when Sean Payton speaks this week whether he's going to adjust. But I was very surprised that Audric Estime was not in there early, because I thought he was going to completely flip the rotation with the running backs. And the fact that he didn't tells me something of where Audric Estime is in all of this. Take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the numbers may say that Shedeur got the better of Dylan Gabriel in their respective tryouts with the Cleveland Browns in preseason, but my next guest will give you the definitive answer because he grinds tape like no one else. Jake Burns from the Browns Film Room Breakdown Podcast joins me next on Extra Sports 1300.
Couple of accidents to be aware of.
This is Cale McCarr from the Colorado Avalanche. Now back to Drive Time Sports with Ryan Kaufman on Extra Sports 1300.
Let's step away from the Denver Broncos discussion for just a moment. And I don't know, I haven't taken a formal poll or anything, but I would say the most watched team around these parts, other than the Broncos this preseason, might be the Cleveland Browns. Dylan Gabriel gets his opportunity to showcase himself against the Philadelphia Eagles. And joining me now to further break down how that went is Jake Burns of Browns Film Breakdown Podcast. Jake, really appreciate the time, man. How are you? Jake, you got me? Oh, we're having can you hear me, Jake? No, can't hear.
Not hearing anything. Hang on just a moment.
Okay, we're having
there we go.
Issues with Jake hearing me. You got me now, Jake? Okay, cool. How are you, man?
You know, we're okay. We're living in a twisted football world over here. It's been I think the way to put it around the Browns is, you know, the arrival of Watson in 2022 set off like a hurricane of volatility is probably the way to say it, that has lasted now into the decision to bring in these two young quarterbacks in a way that is, you know, I think the divisive is the way to still put it. Until they solve this in perpetuity, it remains a very opinionated position in the world of sports here.
Well, let's start with just Dylan Gabriel. What did you see on Saturday from the rookie out of Oregon?
Yeah, so some really good moments. I thought he had a very decisive process. I thought he did a lot of what he did at Oregon, which is, hey man, we're giving you high-low reads, we're giving you, you know, read invert defenders, curl flat, make a throw off that, quick decision stuff, clean footwork, accurate football. Made a couple really nice pinpoint throws near sidelines that needed to be delivered in third down situations. Also, you know, because he carries a stigma being right at 5'11", of is he big enough to navigate the chaos of 6'5" ogres in front of him and find passing windows, which is a really challenging thing to do for really a lot of quarterbacks, but particularly ones who are of the under 6'2" variety. And he's surprisingly, not to, you know, if you watch, and it's not like the Big Ten, and he was at the Big 12 there with Oklahoma. Those some really big linemen and D linemen in those conferences. So it's not like it's foreign to him. And there was a lot of stuff on his tape, especially his last year at Oregon, that's like, hey, he can navigate this, right? He can navigate what he can control. Sometimes the virtue of his size, you are going to have to be anticipatory, window to window, whereas a 6'4" guy can see that a little cleaner. So I thought he did a really nice job. Middle of the field throws, a couple really big chunk throws, a 3rd and 10, a 3rd and 9 that resulted in big plays. Did a great job throwing an in-breaking dig route in the second quarter that went for 28 yards. So some of the middle of the field stuff you want to see. You don't want your guys who are of a limited stature to be guys who are pinpointing sort of the outside the hash mark stuff all the time, because that's very scouting based and can really be a problem. So I thought he navigated that. I thought he was calm under pressure in the pocket, kind of getting where he needed to get to navigate window to window. So that was encouraging. So I liked a lot of what I saw from him. There were a couple mistakes. There was a handoff that was mishandled on a concept that's called a wham concept. It's kind of triple trap. They call it wham. It's popular. You're getting 3 traps at the line of scrimmage, tight end, guard, and the opposite guard are kind of all working on the line. Well, the aiming point of the running back and Dylan's movement into the back, it got messed up. Who's at fault there? It's always going to be the quarterback blamed on that. We'll have to see how they run it later to see if the quarterback is a little wider. So there was a mishandled snap there. Nobody wants that. That's a turnover. And then a bootleg, he made a throw that he probably should have just put in the stands, where his backside drag and his front side release tight end ran into each other. If you know, and if your folks are football people, you know, high, medium, low bootleg stuff is how you attack defenses. And the medium and the low got really tightly compressed, and it ended up creating an opportunity for somebody to get their hands on the football. So those 2 plays removed, a pretty good performance. You know, albeit preseason, a lot of basic nature of both teams, a lot of cover 3 from the Eagles, you know, some different mug front stuff they were doing here and there. But for what you want to see. Can you navigate the pocket? Can the process be clean in and out of the huddle? Can he check protection at the line of scrimmage? Can he deliver the football on time accurately? A lot of encouraging stuff.
How would Dylan Gabriel's film compare and contrast with Shador's a week earlier?
I think that's the popular sentiment is who was better. And I think both just had things you liked and things you didn't like. I thought Shador did a fantastic job of navigating the pocket in his own right, sliding away from pressure, staying calm, keeping the lower half in the place you want to keep it, delivering the football with accuracy down the field as well. He struggled with some short throws, some slants that were inaccurate, that needed to be brought into more of a pinpoint, portion of the field. And I thought there were some second half scramble opportunities he could have gotten a little more out of, but he delivered the football well for most of the night. I thought he put it downfield in a nice way. He had a great bootleg where he completed a touchdown throw there that kind of the in between the two layers on a very much, we call those big time throws. It was a really nice ball that was kind of all over social media. And then he did a nice job right before halftime of delivering working front side to a backside dig in the second window. He did a great job of finding that for a 15-yard touchdown too. I mean, I think they both had good games. The thing people want to do in Cleveland, it's so wild to me, Ryan, how quickly this football world has been like, we got to define these people. We got to define the outcomes of their career based on the earliest moments that we view them. And to me, I think that's just an unhealthy way to go about it. I thought that they both had some really nice moments. I think that there's parts of each of their game that is projectable to play in the NFL. Who's calling them starters? Who's calling them anything more than that? You can't do that right now. But the traits were good enough that I feel positive about them getting an opportunity to play this year. Should it come up, then it's intriguing. I mean, the Browns have 2 first-round picks next year. It's no secret they're going to be chasing a high-end quarterback in the next draft. But you do want to see a little of what these guys can do, because if one of them had a late season arrival Brock Purdy type run, the way Brock did in his rookie year, it becomes interesting to say we're going to give that guy a chance and maybe use that on a tackle of the future and a wide receiver of the future. So there's definitely we need to know a little bit sooner than maybe is healthy for a 3rd and 5th round pick because of the situation coming with 2 firsts. But I do feel like both of those guys in their first performances for where they were selected had really good showings.
Jake Burns, Browns film breakdown, joining me here on Drive Time Sports. You're preaching to the choir, because I'm telling people around here, wait till next year to really start making some assertions about who Bo Nix is, even as a quarterback. And he's way farther along than Dylan Gabriel and Shador are in their careers. But
and it's going to be uneven. I don't mean to interrupt you, Ryan, but we went through that with Baker Mayfield, where his first year, extremely encouraging. Then in his second year, takes some steps back because it's just defenses started to really figure out what he liked to do. What was his fastball? We'll take that away from him. And then he learned, evolved, had a better 20. It's so capricious, man. Like, these young guys are going to go through ups and downs. And I think looking back on it, we can all say that the Browns gave up on Baker too early, but that's the difficulty in the current CBA. We got to make a decision in 4 years, essentially, if this guy is going to be a guy we give $150, $200 million to. And sometimes you're on the right side of that argument. And right now the Browns are on the very much wrong side of it as Baker thrives in Tampa. Listen, I'm a big Bo Nix fan, believer in him, man. And I hope it works. But like you said, man, you got to get ready to ride the wave, because coordinators adjust, defenses adjust. They're going to try to make it difficult on the things he doesn't like to do. And it's just, how does he combat that? I'm fascinated personally over here in Ohio to watch it.
How much, I guess I could probably answer my own question just knowing your work, but how much of Bo Nix did you watch? And I know it's not your beat, so to speak, now with you covering the Browns, but I'm just curious your thoughts about Bo Nix coming out of Oregon and what maybe you've seen from afar from him that maybe has reinforced what you thought coming out of Oregon.
Well, I ironically enough have talked to Oregon's offensive coordinator, Will Stein. He was at Lake Travis way back when Baker was drafted back in 2018. So he was around there, and we'd have some conversation about what he knew about Baker. Then he got the job at UTEP and it worked his way through the ranks. And all of a sudden he was at Oregon, right? Working with Dan Lanning. And he he loved Bo. I mean, there was nothing that he didn't like about Bo. Everything was on time, in rhythm, better athlete than people recognize, which is played out in the league. But just because of scheme and how they operate, getting athletes in space in college in the shorter portions of the field, just because they like to operate there to get the football out, to stay on time, to stay in rhythm, keep teams off. It doesn't mean you can't get him around a mind like Sean Payton and work deeper. That's what's played out in real time. So I think the leadership stuff with Bo is translated really well. His ability to soak up an offense, especially one as difficult, tricky to navigate as what he's stepped into with Sean, and his ability to drive the football downfield have all been better. That's why I'm high on him, because I think he did things that a lot of people find to be the harder things in the NFL. So I find myself very intrigued, from a fantasy football perspective, of taking him and being around. I buy the upside. Anytime you get a guy who can process things quickly, is willing to eat downfield, and he's working with a really sharp mind as a head coach, play caller, and that relationship seems to be set for, at minimum 10 years of perpetuity, you would hope. That's the upside swings you want to take. They'll find weapons. They'll continue to draft guys, and they'll get better and better. And the optimism should be high over that way. But I believe in his process as a quarterback, and I certainly, so much of this stuff is tied to who you're with. If you go back, and I was just referencing Baker earlier, they put him with the worst possible tie-in his second year in the league. It matters so much who they're with, calling plays, navigating the hard times to get out of the hard times to the better times. That stuff is so important. So just the pairing of those two guys is something I think, obviously, and I know your folks do already feel that way, optimistic about. And I really think that, Will echoed that, because we talked about him kind of parallel to what he liked that Bo did around that time, and Dylan did after Bo in Oregon and all of that, and how he tried to recruit and tried to preach to, Dylan, hey man, we see your game as a very, very similar stylistically to what Bo did for us. And here's how you can step in and do a lot of the same things, which is what we saw play out in real time. So I think that obviously Bo is a better athlete, more gifted, better arm, but you can see some stylistic similarities in the process, the navigation speed, how they want to operate, get the football out of their hands, let their players eat around them. And it remains to be seen if Dylan's willing to get aggressive down the field in the same way Bo has turned into in his first year in the league. But that's where Will had a lot of compliments for Bo, and I think that crosses over here.
Jake Burns, my guest. Back to the Browns, and you bring up the pairing of Bo Nix and Sean Payton, and how that is setting Bo up for success. I think people look at what's going on with the Cleveland quarterback situation and almost making a false claim that maybe Kevin Stefanski isn't a good. I mean, I'll ask you: are Shador and Dylan Gabriel in a good spot with Kevin Stefanski as their head coach? Setting aside that they were both drafted and all that kind of stuff, but just as a teacher, how good is Kevin Stefanski for these two guys?
It's a great question. I think from the outside looking in, you look at it and you're like, well, they didn't navigate Baker well. The Deshaun hasn't met his standard of what he used to be. I think if you look at Baker's 2020 season, Kevin's first year, the first half of that season was rough. And then Baker talked a lot about figuring out more of what Kevin wanted to do, getting in a better place, more in sync, more in rhythm. And in the back half of 2020, when coming out of that bye week, when the Browns made the playoffs that year, beat Pittsburgh in the wild card, Baker was as good as any quarterback in the league for that stretch of 8-9 games. And then 2021, it fell apart because Baker he really messed up his left shoulder, and it really is a part. He struggled with the nuances of the mechanical stuff, and it just was not a good year for him. And then the Odell Beckham stuff simultaneously fell apart. It was a real ugly situation. But Kevin, because in 22 they trade for Deshaun, but the first 12 games were Jacoby Brissett games, and they were really good. They were really good games, the top end of how Jacoby Brissett has played. And if we go way deeper back into Kevin's bag in 2019 with Kirk Cousins, with Minnesota, got the best out of Kirk Cousins as well. Kevin has actually been really good with quarterbacks. In 2023, when they were down Deshaun again, got hurt again. PJ Walker was finding some levels of okay play. They were playing a bunch of guys trying to solve. And then Flacco kind of walked in late that year and played really well for them. So he's been good. The problem is, and you can probably talk to 10 different people around the Browns organization. You might get 10 different answers. Jimmy Haslam and the people above in the analytical side of things wanted the Browns to try to get more out of Deshaun Watson. Obviously, you've dumped a huge amount of assets into him. They thought that stylistically the offense needed to be different. Deshaun wasn't comfortable running what Kevin liked to run, that under center bootleg, wide zone play action, turn your back to the defense, West Coast staples in the passing game, a lot of empty. It just didn't mesh, and they wanted somebody else to step in, take the reins, give him more of the RPO dense stuff, give him more downfield from the gun, 3-5 step opportunities. So they brought in Ken Dorsey last year and they got lost. I mean, Deshaun gets hurt. He was playing super poorly before then, which is a different conversation entirely about how he lost any level of confidence because of what happened to him publicly. He could never get over the fact that people didn't like him the way he was liked, and it just trickled into his game. But they have gone away from Ken Dorsey this year, back into Kevin's world where he's more comfortable calling plays, operating his offense, and Dylan and Shador in 2 straight weeks have looked as comfortable as any quarterback they've had since Mayfield. Really the Flacco late 23 run, just where are my eyes supposed to be? What are we reading? What's the concept? Are we delivering like that stuff? There's just no confusion, and I feel good about it. So I personally view Kevin as a quarterback lifter. The Browns decided we got Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson in the division. If we ever have Super Bowl aspirations, we got to go through Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen on top of that. Let's chase a unicorn. They thought Watson was still a unicorn. It just didn't work. It didn't pan out for so many reasons that I don't think your people want to hear, and that's okay because I've talked about it way too much, but it didn't work. They got over their skis. And I understand getting zealous because you want to be able to step into those January games and feel like you have a guy who can carry you. But they lost their way, and now they're trying to navigate back into this world where Kevin's at his most comfortable and try to find just a solid answer again in the real world. If they could do it all over again, I guarantee they'd just sign Baker to another structured deal that had a lot of setup raises in it to see if he hit escalators and things. But they got aggressive. You can get mad at them for getting aggressive and chasing something at the highest end of the position, or you can see it as teams should all be doing that because you need a quarterback. Sometimes you hit a Bo, but sometimes you hit a Daniel Jones, or sometimes you hit an Anthony Richardson, not to pick on the Colts, but just an example of like you're chasing that stuff. So they're in a world now where they're trying to dig out of the hole they've dug. So they got to figure it out, and then they got to make a choice whether these guys matter. Maybe they keep one of them into the next year when they may go draft a Lenoris Sellers or somebody of the like in that top 5 pick area. If theirs is bad, or if the Jags are bad this year, they really help themselves in that world.
To that end, you made a great point earlier. I mean, to me, I don't know where this Brown season is going to go, but you got to see these young quarterbacks because you got Arch and Aller, and I don't know, you and I can get together another time and talk about Nussmeier and Aller and these guys and Arch Manning if he's actually good. But they got to see these guys. So just from what you know about Kevin Stefanski's offense and maybe a little bit what you've seen in the 2 past weeks in the preseason, if you had to just say, this is the quarterback that once things go south with Joe Flacco or the Browns are kind of out of it, this is the young quarterback they turn to. What does your gut tell you 2 weeks into the preseason?
It's a cop-out, man, but I don't think they know. I really don't. I think they're just going to keep – my hunch is they move Kenny Pickett in some variety, largely not all Kenny's fault. He's been hurt, and if he's hurt, he can't play. And at this point, to your question's point, what is why would you have him around? The Browns have a gauntlet of a schedule. Usually when you go 3-14, you find an easier schedule. They have an awful schedule. The first 6 games in particular are really brutal. And I understand they want Joe to start the year to keep themselves from throwing a 3rd and 5th round pick into the fire that quick. So having Joe start the year, see where it goes. Is there still a lightning in the bottle they found in late 23 with him? It's worth maybe flirting with, but also worth protecting those young guys from having that. Now, I referenced Brock Purdy as an example earlier, right? And he came in the last 6-7 games, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, put some real competent tape together. The difference was the 49ers had traded multiple first-round picks away to the Trey Lance debacle, and they didn't have that opportunity to pick a quarterback. The Browns do, and that's where it's different. So a lot of people have asked the fair question of like, what do they have to do to prove they're worthy? I don't know if there's anything they can do. I guess one of them could come in mid-year and really have like a Dak Prescott type of run from his rookie year? That's possible. Be great for business on my end. But like, is that feasible? It's pretty low odds. So my hunch here is that they'll give both of them chances. If the season goes the way it's most likely to go, they both get chances at some capacity, and it could happen organically or it could happen in a way that, they structure it, but they'll give them some chances. But I don't think you're going to get the type of answer, and really the situation will not really present itself a long-term Brock Purdy-like look here, where the next year they're like shrugging their shoulders, and it's like, well, we don't have a first-round pick, so let's just continue to, we saw Shador play 5 solid games in the year. Let's just roll into the camp and see what he looks like. Like they just have to. You have to be aggressive. It's a good class. Drew Aller is a Cleveland kid. I mean, he's as Cleveland as it gets. I mean, he's a Mentor, Ohio, which is just south of the city. He loves Cleveland's story. They love Lenore Sellers from everything I gather because of the athletic traits and what they see in their own division. There's a lot of Arch Manning connection between the Haslams, who are as Tennessee blood as it gets, and the Mannings. And there's, they can play that off as much as they want, but the Browns are very in on the Arch Manning scenario. So, yeah, they're in on this class. Cade Klubnik's got a chance. The kid out of Indiana, Fernando Mendoza's got a chance. Like, there's guys, but I think the world of like next year, and I know I'm not answering your question, but like next year, I think it's whoever they like the most. My gut tells me Dylan, and he's probably backing up whatever rookie they draft. That's the hunch I have. That's where it's ultimately going to go. But I would love to be wrong. I'd love to catch up with you next summer and one of them takes off and they get to draft a wideout and a tackle and thrive and prosper that way. So fingers crossed over here.
Well, interesting times for you, Jake. That is for sure. And it doesn't look like there's an end in sight given this quarterback crop coming up and where the Browns may be in all of this. Where can people find more of this great insight that you give on the Browns?
Yeah, if your folks are into like watching other people suffer, we do run a Browns site called brownsfilmbreakdown.com, and it's on Substack. It's a great platform with an app built in for content delivery. So a lot of film rooms and some newsletters in the morning and stuff of that nature meant to like enrich the deep X's and O's part of the game. So yeah, just brownsfilmbreakdown.com, and then there's an audio podcast on Spotify and all the traditional Apple podcast places. Same name, Browns Film Breakdown is the name of it. So yeah, we're an everyday show, everyday website. So, always happy to jump on and help out and, pulling for your Broncos over this way too, which might make some old school Browns fans upset, but we're a different era now.
Well, this was enlightening. So I definitely recommend people check out more of your work, Jake, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Thanks so much for carving out some time for me today.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
You bet. That is Jake Burns. He grinds Browns film on a daily basis with the Browns Film Breakdown. And as I mentioned, check out the Substack, also the audio podcast, wherever fine podcasts are given away. Great stuff there from Jake. Put it in at the end there. Dylan Gabriel might be the guy there, but we'll see. But I think, to Jake's point, I think what Kevin Stefanski did very well in these 2 weeks, and that's why I asked him a question about Stefanski being kind of the teacher, if you will. I thought he put both Shador and Dylan Gabriel in very comfortable positions that they were both able to showcase what they do best, and now it's what they do best. What do the Browns need more of? 719-247-1313. We'll have more Drive Time Sports right after this.
From the 11 Alert team at KKTV, here's Southern Colorado's spring sports station in Olympic City, USA. Extra Sports.
We'll get back into what I saw from the Broncos against Arizona on Saturday, but there was something that you probably saw that probably excited you as a Broncos fan that turned out to be Fugazi. And it was the quote from Micah Parsons' podcast. Take a listen. So it turns out that Micah Parsons never said that. He has not done his podcast since January, and basically the crew there on the Broncos broadcast got senteled. If you are familiar with NBA Twitter, you will know there is an account called NBA Sentel that intentionally puts out lies. They usually pick on Kevin Durant. There's something there I don't quite understand, but they usually put out these fake reports, fake quotes, all this kind of stuff. And it's just to basically dupe people. Remember when fake Woj existed? So that's what happened. Micah Parsons never said that. And I give Ryan Harris a ton of credit because it's a little bit embarrassing for sure. But I look at the people who do this, like this is how they spend their time. Like you have nothing better to do, nothing to bring to the table more than just putting out fake tweets to try and dupe people. Like it seems like, and I enjoy a few of them on occasion, but just like the thought of devoting all your time to doing that feels like you could be doing something better. But Ryan Harris owned up to it, said he got duped. It was a little embarrassing, but it's hardly the first media entity to get duped by the trolls on social media. So just in case you saw that and you didn't see the follow-up, yeah, Micah Parsons never said that. Now, should he feel that way? Probably. And I've talked about that. Micah Parsons in Dallas's or in Denver's defense. I make the swap Parsons for Benito. I make that deal tomorrow. So while he never said that, don't you think Micah Parsons might feel it at some level? Now, there's another pass rusher that definitely will not say. So just for future reference, nobody put up any quotes on television that say Trey Hendrickson would like to go to the Denver Broncos because he'll never say that. But now Trey Hendrickson apparently is available via trade. And Diana Rossini is reporting that Cincinnati is asking for a young defensive player and a first-round pick. Just to put the kibosh on this, Hendrickson doesn't fit with the Broncos. It wouldn't make sense with the idea that you have to give up, let's just say Nick Benito. You give up Nick Benito, you give up a first-round pick, you have to turn around and pay Trey Hendrickson just like you're going to pay Nick Benito. And he's not it's not a seamless fit as Micah Parsons would be. So to me, it makes no sense for the Denver Broncos to even be mentioned with Trey Hendrickson. The importance of this, though, you know where I stand on the Denver Broncos as far as whether they are a playoff team or not. But as we inch closer to the start of the season, there is a last man standing kind of vibe going on here. So you have the Chargers losing Rashawn Slater. Now you have the Bengals, through credible news sources, entertaining the possibility of trading Trey Hendrickson. As a team, I look at the Denver Broncos and I say, I don't think they'll make the playoffs this year. But if the Chargers keep losing offensive linemen and the Bengals volunteer to trade their best defensive player, by the time we get to the season opener, the Broncos might be that 7th best team in the AFC. This is insane to me. I know you have to make decisions when you pay your quarterback like the Bengals are doing. They don't even bat an eyelash at paying T. Higgins. It's like, how many weapons does Joe Burrow need? But they don't even flinch and they pay T. Higgins. Yet, they're going to do this with Trey Hendrickson. I promise you, Joe Burrow could be close to as good as he was this year without T. Higgins. But the Bengals are not going to be a playoff team if they voluntarily trade Trey Hendrickson. It just, like, you need him. And I get it. There's a number and there's a salary cap, and I understand all of this. But the idea that you would go so far as to be willing to trade him, you know, Washington with Terry McLaurin, I don't quite understand that situation either, given that Jaden Daniels is on a rookie contract and McLaurin is his best and most reliable weapon. And now they might trade Brian Robinson. But at least all they're doing is saying there's a number we're not willing to go to because of your age. And you can agree with that or you can disagree with that. But at least the Commanders aren't like, yeah, you know what? We may trade Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is requesting a trade. The Commanders don't seem inclined to deal him. They're just saying we're not paying you top of market at 30 years old. The Bengals are going, not only are we unwilling to pay Trey Hendrickson top of market at 30 years old, which he is, if we can't get this done, we might trade you. And that's another step beyond maybe some of the foolishness that's going on in Washington. If the Bengals get rid of Trey Hendrickson and Rashawn Slater is hurt, and you start looking at these other wild card contenders and go, well, they're not as good as I thought they were going to be 5 months ago. They're not as good. All of a sudden, Broncos are sitting there. They're taking care of their players. They're healthy. They got all this momentum going. Who knows by the time this season opener rolls around where I have the Broncos in the pecking order. But the Bengals reportedly willing to listen to trade offers on Trey Hendrickson. And the reported asking price, young defensive player and a first-round pick. Not a fit for the Broncos, but there are a lot of teams that should be picking up that phone and calling the Cincinnati Bengals. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the 3 biggest takeaways from the Broncos preseason win against the Cardinals.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well,